Today we've got a crazy story of traumatizing revenge when routine blood work goes wrong. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, creepy security guard kept harassing my female coworkers. Creepy guard kept harassing my female coworkers over the phone. I got tired of it and decided to play his game. He didn't like it. For context, I've worked in CCTV monitoring for the better part of the last decade. This particular exchange took place right around the beginning of COVID. It's pretty routine for us to collaborate with physical security guards on properties we monitor. Guards usually call when they're arriving or leaving the property or preparing to do their rounds, so our operations center is aware of the activity. There was this one particular guard on the West Coast, we'll call him Gary, who would always try to flirt with my female coworkers if they were unlucky enough to get his calls. A lot of it was typical old man stuff, calling them beautiful instead of their names, commenting on their pretty voices, but over time he started getting bolder and was going from just annoying to straight up creepy. If I remember right, the tipping point was when he asked one of my coworkers about what she was wearing, as if she showed up to her office gig in lingerie and fishnets. She sidestepped the question and finished the call with way more professionalism than that jerk deserved, then told the rest of us what had happened. I could tell she was kind of shaken up by the interaction. Since we worked nights, there wasn't really anyone she could report it to right away, and by the end of her shift, she just wanted to go home, so it didn't go anywhere. Cut to the next shift. Around 9 p.m., which was his usual call time, the phone rang and Gary's number popped up. By that point, we had had his number memorized and most of the people in the room were reluctant to take the call. I don't even know what got into me, but I picked up the phone and put on this over-the-top, sassy, flirty voice, sort of like him from Powerpuff Girls, given my deepish voice. Side note, Gary had a cringe nickname for himself, Mr. World Security, which I took to be a play on his company's name, changed slightly so I don't dox him. We knew what he looked like because 1, we see him on camera just about every night, and 2, during one of his earlier attempts to flirt with one of the girls, he shared his URL to his crappy WordPress website for his security business, and on the landing page was a picture of him in his security uniform flexing his biceps. I really wish I was joking, but the guy's ego was just that massive. I decided to use this knowledge to my advantage. "Well, hello, Mr. World Security," I said. "How are you and those big, chocolatey muscles doing tonight?" I could feel his discomfort through the phone. He replied with, "Hello, sir. I have arrived and will be beginning my rounds, sir." I refused to let him off that easy. "What's wrong, Gare Bear? Not in the mood to play tonight? I was hoping we could keep each other company for a little while. You know, have a little fun." Giving borderline phone hooking up hotline energy. I swear, I don't know where any of this came from. This little character just jumped out and took the wheel. By this point, you could almost hear his paper-thin masculinity shattering. In an aggressive/offended tone, he said, "Listen, bro, I don't know what you heard, but I don't get down like that. This ain't that, so you need to start acting accordingly." That's when I dropped the act and in my normal voice said to him, "Yeah, man, I totally get it. I wouldn't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable by flirting with them against their will during what should be a professional conversation. That would be really not cool." He went quiet for a bit, then just said, "Okay, I get you. Understood." I told him to have a good night and hung up the phone. After I hung up, I looked around and realized the whole room had been listening in on the call. We all just kind of looked at each other and smiled before the room erupted into laughter. A few of the women even thanked me. He called back later that night and the conversation was short, concise, and professional. It pretty much stayed that way until our contract with that site ended a few months later. It's been about 4 or 5 years since that night. I've since been promoted out of direct operations, but every once in a while someone in the office will greet me with, "Well, hello, Mr. World Security," in that sassy voice, and we still get a good laugh out of it. Long story short, some people really can't stand the taste of their own medicine. Update: Thank you guys for all the love in the comments. I didn't really take into account how universal this experience must be for women in the workplace. I'm glad my post could bring you a bit of catharsis. I help manage this company now, and I'm very clear with the employees about my open door policy. I have zero tolerance for mistreatment in any capacity and do my best to make sure the environment is safe for anybody that walks in the door. You guys reminded me why this is so important to me, so thank you. Well, hello, Mr. World Security. I might say that belt that looks like it's hanging on for dear life sure looks like it's sturdy tonight. In all seriousness, what is it about this that allows them to talk to people over the phone like that? That should be just a professional, quick check-in. Is it the fact that there's so much distance that it makes them feel untouchable or something? Have their brains just melted and degraded enough to the point where they feel okay saying that stuff? RubyTX commented, I, even at old lady age, have what is considered a fairly attractive voice. On those rare occasions when I've had men, and it is always men, make off-color comments, I drop into stern old lady voice and say, Son, I'm old enough to be your mother/grandmother. Do I need to come over and smack you with my cane to make the point? They usually drop out of the voice chat. I'm mostly talking gamers, not professional space as in your case, and probably talk crap about me. But sometimes, getting to the age where you have zero freaks to give is an actual superpower. You did great, Mr. World Security. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy people who get traumatized getting their own traumatizing revenge back, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? Our next story is, Teacher Threatened to Call Recently Passed Mother. When I was in 8th grade, my friend and classmate lost his mother. He was kind of a troublemaker, so I guess it made teachers notice his misbehavior more. So about a week after his mom passing, we were at class and he just laid on his desk and didn't interact with anyone the whole day. Understandably so, I was surprised he even showed up. Our teacher didn't like that and threatened to send him to the principal. I guess she didn't like his lack of reaction on this even more because she said, What will your mother say about this, huh? I'm going to call her today and tell her everything. Class became dead silent. My friend just stood up, said good luck trying to reach her, and walked out of class. Later, when we told her, she was feeling really bad and apologized to him, but still, you would have thought teachers get some kind of memo in situations like this, but I guess she skipped that meeting. Actually, I feel like that's kind of an interesting thought. Do teachers get heads up? I mean, it is kind of a very intensely private matter. Do schools in general just get automatically notified? I don't know. You know, I've never truly even thought about what would happen in a situation like that. I guess I take it for granted that fortunately it doesn't really happen that often. Inevitable Fox 81194 commented, happened to me at 14. My 22-year-old sister had passed and I'd finally gone back to school. First lesson was French, and I'd been crying after my mom had dropped me off. I walked into class with a teacher that never liked me. She was a stern woman and barked at us all to hurry up and sit down. I was doing as I was told, but she suddenly snapped at me and flew off the handle about me sighing loudly. She screamed at me, the whole class just still in shock. It was in that moment when I realized I didn't need to take her crap. I grabbed my stuff and just walked out. As I was leaving, I heard a friend say, Miss, she was crying. Her sister's just died. I walked up to my tutor room, found my form tutor, told him what happened and that I was going home, because if that's how I was going to be treated, I'd rather be at home with grieving family. I did go home, and when I finally went back, the teacher had been let go. Apparently it was the final nail in the coffin of a long list of issues. Probably didn't help that my mother called the school, reported her, and lodged a full complaint. I hated that woman. She would scream in your face for even the smallest of infractions. Our next story is, New doctor wouldn't allow my repeat prescription. Without going into too much detail, I nearly passed on a few years ago. A&E, woo-woo ambulance, resus unit, the lot. I was then put on life-sustaining medication, which is absolutely critical to keeping me alive day to day. Cue the new doctor at my doctor's surgery deciding out of the blue that he wants to review my medication and that he won't approve my prescription refill. I have precisely 3 days left of medication. So I call, a bit frantic, book an appointment, and go on that day and ask him to please prescribe my medication. He's concerned at the high dosage and thinks we need to go back to the specialist, and until we do, he won't re-prescribe. The soonest appointment with a specialist is 6 months. I try to explain, but he's not listening. I say, I'll need that in writing with a signature then. He asks why. I say, because in less than 72 hours, the mortician will have to explain to my family who made that call. Funnily enough, he suddenly was happy to sign for a refill and hasn't tried to push it since. Jerk. I also did call the specialist. She wrote a scathing email she CC'd both me and the head of the practice into. He kept his job, but he'll never make that mistake again. I know it's awful and it makes me out to be incredibly nosy, but does OP saying, without going into too much detail, want to make you speculate or try to figure out what the heck was going on here? Like, what medication is it? Now, I don't know if OP can, but I would be looking for I would go to a whole new facility, not even a new doctor. I wouldn't want to keep going at a place that employs a doctor like that. Problem is, OP mentioned A&E, so I'm assuming this is somewhere in the UK. I'm assuming it's not just as simple as finding a new doctor. Ginger Momra commented, you know how whenever you have a new mechanic, plumber, or electrician, they'll look, shake their head, and criticize the work of the previous one? Some doctors have the same I know better mentality. My husband was on kidney dialysis for several years without any big problems. Traveling anywhere was difficult to coordinate, but after 4 years at home, we tried taking a 2-week holiday. In order to receive dialysis in another city, you had to submit a scheduling request and then meet with the local specialist. Before his first away dialysis appointment, that local specialist reviewed my husband's chart, tutted, scribbled something, and said, "Your numbers look all wrong. I've made some changes." My husband felt weak and tired after that first treatment, but we thought he was just worn out from the trip. By the second treatment 2 days later, he was so shaky he nearly collapsed at the door of the clinic. The technicians asked a few questions, checked the charts, made an urgent call to the specialist, and soon put the numbers back to the way they were. My husband felt much better a few hours later. Lessons learned all around, I hope. Our next story is Too Young to Be Disabled. So I'm 38-year-old female. This had happened loads of times to me, but this is the one that annoyed me the most. I was about 31 and I was on my way to my doctor's appointment. So I drove myself there like normal and parked in the designated disabled space at the end of the street. I have a disabled badge and a disabled parking disc. This is clearly on display on my dashboard for any parking wardens that may come by. All of a sudden, a car pulls up behind me and pulls really close to my bumper. This made me worry about getting out after my appointment, especially since there are no spaces behind the one I was in. The next thing I know, there's a loud, frantic tapping on my window. This gives me a small heart attack because it was literally like something from a horror movie. Outside my window was an elderly woman who looked to be in her 70s. She was knocking on my window non-stop. I rolled down my window to see what she was needing, and before I even got a chance to open my mouth, she starts yelling at me. "How dare you park in this spot? This is a disabled spot. My husband needs this spot for his doctor's appointment, so you need to move now." It's absolutely disgusting that young people these days have no respect for anything. I looked at her for a moment, completely dumbfounded, and because I didn't say anything for a second, she started on a tirade the second time. This time I stopped her and I said that I also needed the space. I'm disabled. If she looked at my dashboard, she would see my disabled badge. This seemed to send her off the deep end. "That's not your badge. You must have stolen that badge. You are too young to be disabled." Something in me snapped at that point. I took my badge off the dash and showed her my picture on the back. I then told her to step back from my door. Now, I can kinda walk on crutches on a good day, but on my bad days, I have to rely on my wheelchair. On the seat beside me, I had both in case I needed them. It was one of my better days, so I could have used the crutches, but this lady had really ticked me off at this time, so I may have exaggerated every single movement of getting the chair out of the car and assembled, and I may have made some extra pain noises transferring from the car to the chair. It always hurts me because of my conditions, but I may have put some extra flair to be a jerk. This lady watched me in horror the whole time. She didn't offer to help. To be honest, she seemed so horrified I doubt she could have if she wanted to. So I closed the car door and looked her dead in the eyes and went, "Am I disabled enough for you?" Her face went white. Any color was completely gone. Before wheeling myself away, I told her she should be ashamed of herself. She was the one with no manners and respect. It doesn't matter how old you are, disability doesn't discriminate, unlike you just did. On that note, she scurried back to her car as fast as she could, promptly reversed from the back of my car, and drove off rather hurriedly. As I said, this had happened a lot in my life, even as recently as last month, but this was the one that I couldn't keep my emotions in check. Thanks for reading my long story. You know, I don't think most people, if put in a situation like that, would be able to keep their cool. Honestly, I think one of the most annoying situations is that situation where you are somewhere where you're supposed to be, doing something that you're very much allowed to do or supposed to do, and somebody comes by clueless as ever and goes, "You can't be here, you're not supposed to do that." Because not only in that situation am I exasperated just because do I have to sit here and explain myself, I'm also, to be honest, in the back of my mind thinking, this person is so clueless. Dragonfire400 commented, "Since when is youth a cure-all medicine?" Our next story is, my employer requests after sick leaves that I describe my symptoms, so I do. So yeah, my 36-year-old male employer has this whole form that everyone has to fill every time they return from sick leave. It's for accounting, and mostly contains pretty dull stuff, such as the length of the leave and what category of sick leave it is and on whose permit, but it also has this whole section that I've always found rather direct, which is basically making you describe your symptoms. I presume it's there because, as you know, bosses are always paranoid about people faking sick leave, so after a while, I started to make sure that they hate their own nosy forms. And I started giving symptom descriptions in unnecessary and graphic detail. Here are some of my favorites over the years. My diarrhea was so loose that it bordered on drinkable water. The clumps of phlegm that I coughed up could stick light objects onto walls. This is a confirmed fact. While I did not proceed to test this, by all accounts my bowel movements behaved as a non-Newtonian fluid. The pus-filled discharge smelled so bad that it could knock out small mammals. At first, my boss would just come to me in the hallway and nod mysteriously, "I read your report." Now she seems used to it. It's not really for her anyway, and she usually just skims through them. She said it's the people at accounting she feels sorry for. I've never met anyone from accounting. Then again, they still keep the same form after years and years, so maybe they enjoy reading these? Edit, no, this is in no way a legal thing to do here. This is in Finland. But the way the law works here, no one minds. I could probably just not put anything there and no one would mind. No one could realistically get in trouble for what they answer in there. I just want to make a point. So here's the thing though, by OP complying and writing down those things, sure, it's a little bit of hyperbole, but still, it kind of is like a glowing sign to them that, yeah, well, at least OP's not lying here. But here's the thing, OP said that it's not really a legal thing and that you could probably get away not putting anything. So what if somebody said, I just felt like having a nice rest day to kick back and sleep in a little bit. Like, now I want to know, what would they do? Count to Zero commented, "This is why I love living in Germany. If you're not able to work, you get a doctor's note, and that goes to your employer. It basically says name is not able to work from day 1 until day X. That's it. During that time, you're on leave. Your boss has no legal rights to ask you why or how you were sick. It doesn't matter if you had your appendix removed or were suffering from depression. The company doesn't need to know." Our next story is, why my puppy flunked out of obedience school. Several years ago, I got a puppy and signed him up for puppy kindergarten obedience classes. The teacher turned out to be an extremely dominating woman with a loud nasal voice and the personality of a Marine drill sergeant. She devoted the first lesson to harshly criticizing everything we did, and at the end of the class, we all slunk out feeling like complete idiots who couldn't even be trusted with a care of a goldfish. For the second class, we were told to bring treats for training and to be sure our puppies were hungry. I brought treats my puppy loved at home, but he was so excited to be around the other pups that he wouldn't eat any of them. As a result, he wasn't very motivated to learn the commands we were supposed to be training our puppies to obey. The teacher noticed and rudely berated me at some length for bringing the wrong treats. She then took out some treats out of her fanny pack and proclaimed that all dogs love these. She held one out and smirked triumphantly when my pup took it in his mouth, only to be gobsmacked a few seconds later when he spat it out on her foot. She was shocked speechless and her mouth kept opening and closing like a fish as she struggled to find something to say. I completely lost it and laughed until my sides hurt. Several of my classmates joined in. That's how my puppy flunked out of obedience school. I subsequently took him to a different class with a nice, very professional teacher, and now my dog is a well-behaved adult. Funniest thing my dog ever did. So wait, what did they do? They flunked OP's dog out of the class because they didn't like the right kind of treats? Because their dog didn't like that treat and spat it on her foot? You and your dog are done. Never show your faces around here again. Like, what happened? Chris Drez commented, "What irks me is people don't do puppy school because their puppy is well behaved. They go to learn to behave. My pup was a nightmare in school. I feel she passed because I knew the trainer. That being said, she was the best dog, so loyal and eager to be a good girl." Our next story is, mind your own business, sir. This happened a few weeks ago, and I'm still proud of how I handled it. For context, I'm a lady in my mid-20s and currently dealing with some medical stuff that's made me put on a bit of weight. I've been trying to eat healthier, but honestly, it's hard enough staying positive without strangers chiming in with their 2 cents. So, I'm at the grocery store, putting together a salad from the bar for lunch, when this random man decides to share his expert advice on my body. He said, "You know, sweetie, a salad isn't gonna fix all that." At first, I tried to ignore him, but he kept going. "Have you thought about going to the gym? It might make you feel better. You don't look like you're very happy." I don't know what kind of energy the universe thought I had that day, but clearly it wasn't the smile and nod kind. So I turned to him, smiled sweetly, and said, "Wow, thanks for that, Dr. Stranger. Would you like to hear about my chronic illness and how steroids have been wrecking my body? Or should we skip to the part where I educate you on minding your own business?" He mumbled something about just trying to help and scurried off like the roach he was. The cashier gave me a little thumbs up as I walked past. It's wild how people feel so entitled to comment on someone else's body like it's public property. Hopefully, he learned to zip it next time. What was the guy even trying to get out of this? Just making himself feel better by putting other people down? I mean, it's not like him walking up to OP and being like, "Hey, have you ever tried the gym? Have you ever tried exercise?" Is ever going to be an actually novel idea. Like, what was his ultimate goal? Convince OP to put down the salad and go pick up some protein at the deli instead? "You know, that one salad won't fix everything. Why don't you go pick up a pack of Little Debbie's?" Condensed sarcasm commented, "People just aren't raised right. I'm teaching my kids the 10-second rule when it comes to other people. Is it something they can fix in 10 seconds or less? For example, fly is down, spinach and teeth, shoe untied. If not, example, weight, disability, skin color, dental issues, etc., don't mention it." Our next story is, don't wiggle the needle. I was watching The Click, and this popped into mind. Back in 2018, I was 43-year-old male. I needed blood work done the day before my hernia surgery. I have a major issue, the vasovagal reaction. Blood outside my body doesn't bother me. I can clean up a bad cut or a nosebleed without issue. But when it's being actively taken, instant dizziness, nausea, and the whole room turns into the gravitron. I told the phlebotomist this up front. My usual workaround is lying down and having an extra alcohol wipe to smell. Her response was a masterpiece of, "Yeah, no. We don't have a place for you to lie down and I can't spare any wipes." Okay, fine. I was seated at a table and I figured I'd try to tough it out since the blood work was mandatory and I really wanted to get this surgery over and done with. She got the needle in and started drawing. 5 vials were needed. 5. I'm assuming they were feeding a small hospital vampire. I was doing okay, maybe a little pale and clammy, but holding steady until the blood flow stopped. She looked confused and I pointed out gently that the tourniquet was still on. She looked me right in the eye and said, "It's supposed to stay on." I was already struggling and this baffling moment of incompetence pushed me over the edge. At that point, she did the worst thing possible. Instead of, taking the tourniquet off to allow more blood to flow into my arm, she reached across the table and wiggled the needle while it was still in my arm. The second that happened, it was over for me. No amount of white knuckling it could get me through. I instantly went from on the struggle bus to full-on Linda Blair projectile mode. Since I hadn't needed to fast, the massive Denny's feast I'd had on the way in, pancakes, eggs, sausage, and coffee, erupted from me and landed all over her. For anyone who remembers You Can't Do That on television, it looked like she had just said, I don't know, but Nickelodeon let the slime go bad. She had multiple warnings. There were multiple points of failure, the tourniquet, the no wipes rule, not letting me lie down, and then the final catastrophic error of wiggling a sharp object inside a patient. I didn't feel bad for a second. She had to have someone else come in and deal with the biohazard and the needle in my arm. I walked out after a short recovery rest, feeling completely fine, ready for surgery the next day, and utterly unbothered by the fact that I just covered a healthcare professional in a breakfast buffet. Moral of the story, listen to your patients. The thing is, it's not hard to accommodate OP to some degree. Maybe they don't have a bed to lie down on, but you have to use an alcohol wipe to put the needle in, don't you? Like, at the very worst, couldn't you wipe down the arm where you're about to put the needle in and then hand the wipe to OP to sniff? Like, that probably still would have been good enough, right? Regular Boot 3540 commented, as if alcohol wipes are rare and expensive. Our next story is, neighbor wouldn't shut up about how many rooms our house has. A few years back, my husband and I moved to a new house. It was in the right part of town, good price, good school district, good yard, good bones. The only real issue with it, besides needing new paint, was that it was bigger than what we were looking for. But at that point in our search, we had already put offers on 6 or 7 other houses, so we were past being picky. We were looking at starting a family pretty imminently, so it's not like having 5 bedrooms when we only wanted 3 was going to end us. So we moved into our too big house, got pregnant a few months later, lost the baby a couple of months after that. It was pretty devastating physically and emotionally, so we chose to wait a bit before trying again. That summer, we went to a meet your neighbors kind of event hosted just down the road. We brought cookies, put faces to names, and were just generally socializing when a couple came up to me and my husband and asked, "Oh, are you the ones who moved into a dress?" I responded that we were, and then they said something along the lines of, "Well, that house is too big for you. Where are all your kids? We need more kids around here. We probably would have bought that house if it was on the market when we were looking. We could really use the extra space. We have 3 boys and they bounce off the walls." I chose to say something like, "Oh, we just haven't gotten to that point yet," and politely changed the subject to their kids. No big deal. Later, as my husband and I were grabbing our empty cookie tray and leaving, the couple shouted across the gathering to us to again remind us that our house was really too big for only 2 people. I can't remember what exactly the wife said, but it ran along the lines of, "It's actually selfish to keep all that square footage empty without any kids. A family with kids could have moved in there." Like somehow she was personally injured by me not moving in with children. So, I walked a bit closer to not be shouting, but still plenty of people got to overhear me go, "Well, we were going to wait a bit after my miscarriage, since I still can't quite forget how it felt nearly bleeding out in my bathtub. But since you say so, I guess my husband and I need to run home to get busy." She froze. Her husband started mumbling about, "Well, that wasn't necessary." And a lot of people seemed to be really interested in whatever they happened to be eating or drinking at that moment. I was pretty embarrassed. Cried on the walk home. But that neighbor has never once spoken to me again, so I think it was worth it. And we did end up having a baby. So the neighbor ended up having the ultimate revenge in the end. OP ended up filling that bedroom anyways. In all seriousness though, there's so much condolences you have to have and you have to feel for OP here. It's like the equivalent of having a broken bone in your body and you're trying to hide it from everybody, and everybody shows up with a big smile on their face and keeps kicking you right in the broken shin. I'm just glad for OP's sake that they're able to have their family, and I'm glad for OP's sake they don't have to ever deal with this crazy dumb lady ever again. I mean, just imagining what she's saying makes me so livid. The whole, oh well, you really should have left that house for a family to move in. It legitimately makes me heated to think about. Coffee and a Rabbit commented, "This makes me so irritated on your behalf. We also lost a baby, also moved to a bigger house. So many people couldn't understand why we had bought somewhere so big. I was actually pregnant when we bought it, but it was too early to tell people. But above and beyond that, we wanted yard space for our dog. And if we couldn't have kids, maybe we wanted a craft room and a media room and a golf simulator and a study or something. Do we have to explain our financial choices to you if the place is in our budget? Especially annoying is that no one says that kind of thing to billionaires in houses with 15 bedrooms, just to regular suburban folk for some reason. Infuriating. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another crazy, traumatizing revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That's it, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.